All right, take it away, Kathy.
Great, thanks for joining me. I know there's a lot of security talks happening today, so thanks for choosing mine. I'm hopefully going to make this a lot of fun for you. Security is one of those things that nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to learn about it, nobody thinks it's their problem until it is your problem. So we're going to go over some horror stories of hacks. I started working for Wordfence about 3 years ago. Can everybody hear me okay? Is the audio okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so I've been working with WordPress forever. Wordfence was my security tool of choice, and they put out a call for people who could clean hacked websites. I'm like, I've done that before. Let's see what this entails. So I said only 20 hours a week. I don't want to go too deep into this. And of course, 3 years later, look at me. I've done everything from operations to producing videos and talking to anyone who will listen about site security and WordPress security. Because I cleaned so many hacked websites, it's kind of like that dog. Like, oh my gosh, I have seen some things. Because I knew WordPress so well, it was very easy for me to tell, what files were supposed to be on a site, what those files were supposed to look like. So it was very easy to figure out what wasn't supposed to be there, just like your living room. Where all the furniture is. If somebody moves a big, giant red or purple sofa into the middle of your living room, you're very aware that something is not supposed to be there. So what I want to do is tell you about some of these sites that I cleaned and tell you how they got hacked, so that you can start to make some decisions about your own site security and learn from the mistakes of others so that your site doesn't end up like those sites. Who here thinks their website is under attack right now? 1, 2, 3. I'm going to tell you, every single one of you, if you have a WordPress site, it is under attack right now. You're sitting here at a WordCamp, and they don't care who you are. They don't care what you're doing. They don't care what you know, where you're hosting. If it's WordPress, it's under attack right now. This screenshot is from the Wordfence plugin. We have a little dashboard. We're installed on over 2.5 million sites, and so we detect the hacks as they're happening. This was from a couple of weeks ago. When I first started working for Wordfence, the numbers used to hover down about 1 million. It's growing. The attacks on WordPress are growing all the time. Here's some statistics of what we're seeing over the past 30 days. Bot traffic, and it's all bots, is coming from over 185,000 different IP addresses, and Wordfence is blocking over 3 billion attacks. Now, I have people come up to me all the time saying, but it's just my blog. I'm just putting up cat pictures. I'm just sharing my kids' stories. Why would anybody want to attack my site? Why aren't they going and attacking like the Washington Post site or some other site that's extremely large and has a large traffic base? It doesn't matter how big your site is, how small your site is. They are looking for patterns, and the pattern that they want to attack is WordPress. WordPress is currently powering about 1/3 of the internet. It is the largest, by far, content management system in use. If you look at other content management systems like Joomla or Drupal or even commerce sites, much smaller percentage of the content management share. So for most of the content management run websites, they're using WordPress, and hackers aren't stupid. And it's not just a guy sitting there in a hoodie, going after your site, going after Sally's cat blog. It's a guy in a hoodie, maybe, who's programming a script to go after any and all websites running the most popular content management system and looking for vulnerabilities within that site. They know how the site is structured. They know what vulnerabilities might exist. They're looking for the latest, largest plugin vulnerability that has been disclosed, and they're looking for it on your site. They also don't think you have any idea about security. Let's pick on the Washington Post again. They probably have a security team. maybe, I don't know, 5, 10 guys, I have no idea, I don't work with them, but they have people who are constantly watching network traffic and looking for malicious attacks. Sally's cat blog, probably not. A small business trying to just, get the word out about the services they offer, they're not expecting any security there as well. So if they can hack 10 websites, it is just as valuable to them as hacking, one large website or whatever. They understand those economies of scale. Why are these guys doing this? Anybody have an idea? What do you think? What drives anybody to do anything? Money. There's usually a profit motive. Now there's some defacement contests where these hackers try to get into a site. This happened with WordPress version 4.7. There was a vulnerability in something called the REST API. And with that vulnerability, they could go basically send a request to any page of your site, any blog post of your site, and change the content of that site or that page, and they have these little contests to see how many hacked sites they can actually So you'd get these pages that would say hacked by Bala Sniper, and sometimes they put goofy music on it, or they put a little animated GIF, just kind of I don't know, the guys who go tag the train cars coming out of LA just to get their graffiti on it. Something like that. So there's one motive, but the rest of the motives that we see, it's all profit motive. They're trying to get their pharmaceutical sales site to go higher on the search engines, or they're trying to get, any kind of competitive search engine term to rise higher. And in order to do that, they have to have as many links going to that site as possible. So they hack your site, put links to Viagra pages on their site to try to elevate those in the search engines and make money. They'll also try to put mailers on your site and send out spam, because most hosting providers, most mailing providers will not allow spam mail to go out. If somebody hasn't given you permission to mail to them, they block those types of things, so they're going to try to do things that are illegal or frowned upon by hosting providers. So a lot of times we'll have hosts or customers come to us saying, my hosting provider has shut me down because my site is hacked and sending spam. They will do phishing pages. They will hide something buried into some subfolder of your WordPress installation that basically has some pages that look like the login screen at Google or Chase Bank, and trying to steal credentials. We've also seen a lot of crypto mining, cryptocurrencies, and there were JavaScript miners that were placed on sites in order to mine cryptocurrency and make money that way. So let's talk about the horror stories. How do these sites get hacked? Okay, so last year, we have a site cleaning business. Last year we had a number of sites come in, and usually when we see a hacked site, we see plugins that haven't been updated, core files that haven't been updated, lousy passwords. But we saw these sites coming in that had no problems on them at all. Everything was updated. The only commonality that we saw was that each of these sites was running Jetpack. Oh no, Jetpack's huge. Oh my gosh, is there a vulnerability? What's happening with Jetpack? What we ended up finding out after researching a number of different patterns is that people were reusing passwords on all of their sites. Has anybody ever done that? We've all done it. Every single one of us. When I started way back in the day, I had been using passwords the same password on all of my sites. So we all do it to some extent. And what was happening is people were using the same passwords. They ended up in a data dump, and then they were logging in on WordPress.com and getting into the sites that way. The other thing that we saw people doing a lot of is reusing passwords, and say, for example, if your site is sallyscatblog.com and you're signing up on other services using sallyscatblog.com as your username and using a password that you're using elsewhere, they go to sallyscatblog.com and use that password on that site. So don't reuse your passwords. Another thing that would have helped is using something called two-factor authentication. Either using your cell phone, SMS message that gets you a 6-digit code, or using something like Google Authenticator on your smartphone that will give you a time-based token that will get you into your site. A security principle that's really important is the principle of least privilege. If you have a site and, say, for example, you have someone who only needs to write blog content, give them only access to that blog content. Don't give them access to something like updating plugins. You handle that part. Limit the number of administrators you have on your site. And get rid of all of your unused plugins. Even if you don't need it, if you're not using that plugin, you need to get it off your site. It's like having an uninvited house guest who won't leave. They're going to get into something. And also another thing that would help sites like this is software updates, lessening the impact of escalating privileges. So keep your plugins, themes, core updated. Another horror story, cPanels. Anybody here use a cPanel? Yeah. How many sites do you have in your cPanel?
24.
Okay. All right, so here's a horror story for you. If you have anything more than one site in a cPanel, there's a risk. Brazilian agency comes in with 30 sites in a cPanel, had given admin access to one of his customers. They were using poor passwords, and a hacker got into that particular site, went to the theme editor in WordPress to the 404 page, and rewrote that with a PHP-based backdoor. So every 404 was a backdoor. Used that backdoor to append a redirect script that directed to a bad part of the internet on every single JavaScript file that file had the same permissions for. So 30 sites, every single JavaScript file was polluted with a redirect. What would have helped there? Because all those sites were affected. Because in a cPanel, every site is running under the same permissions. So you want to functionally isolate your sites, one site in a cPanel. Just because you can put additional sites in there doesn't mean you should. This will isolate what hackers can get to. If they get into one site, it pollutes one site, it doesn't pollute all of them. Use better credentials, don't reuse passwords, use that two-factor authentication and least privilege. You can also limit editing access by hardening your WordPress. Go into your WP config, and I'll put all these slides up on Twitter if you want to follow me on Twitter. You could put this one line of code in your WP config, and that will turn off that editor for your theme. Because typically, if you are, your site's developed, you don't need to mess with your theme files anymore. Just turn off the editing if you don't need it. Another problem, non-repository plugins. Okay. Anybody buy plugins or themes from ThemeForest or Code Canyon or any non-repository site? Okay, so security researchers like to go into the WordPress repository and find vulnerabilities. In order to keep their credentials updated, they have to find vulnerabilities, they have to write proof of concepts of how those vulnerabilities can be exploited, and they have to publish that information. Private repositories of code are not easy for them to get to. So what we found on this hacked site, okay, so I see all this malware, clean it all up, go through the log files, and I see an access to something called remote tunnel. So I go to look at that. It's got a password in it, great, but it's essentially a backdoor allowing anyone with that password complete and total access to that account. The problem there is that developers don't like to talk to end users and ask you pesky questions like what version of PHP are you running, because a lot of time end users have no idea. Thank you. So they had this back door so that they could get those kinds of answers and make code tweaks themselves. The problem is, some hacker discovered this on this plugin developer site, went poking around, wrote a script looking for other WordPress sites with the same plugin, and found them and exploited them. Now, if this was in the repository, a security researcher would have found it, but because it was in a closed plugin, nobody found it for a long time. So, what would have helped? If you can help it, stay with repository plugins. There are 50,000 plugins in the repository that are all open source. Security researchers are constantly looking for any types of vulnerabilities. The community reports back on the forums if they find something with a vulnerability. The community really supports you in that regard because we all kind of work together. If one person's having a problem on a site, it elevates so that it's visible and problems get fixed a lot faster. When it's in a closed source system, that doesn't happen quickly. So how do you manage security? Layers. Assume things are going to go wrong. Make sure you have log files. Back up everything. Even back up your log files and back them off of your server. We've seen cases where hackers get in and delete log files because they're trying to cover their tracks. And then take a look at hardening WordPress. There is a link here that's in the slides that you can go take a look and see some ways that you can tighten up your WordPress installation, check your file permissions, all of that fun stuff. And it's good to have a security solution to support you. I mean, security is ultimately in your hands. But if you have a solution, I'm not selling from the stage, but Wordfence is free, it's in the repository, 90% of it is completely and totally free. Take a look at that. There's other security plugins that you can use as well to look for intrusions and to let you know if you have a problem. If you have any questions, I can answer those now. So, and know this is a lot of information in a short period of time. Security is a huge topic, but I'll try to answer questions. Yes?
You mentioned that the paid plugins don't have the scrutiny from the community. What about the premium versions of the free plugins?
Right. Okay, so premium version of paid plugins. Yes. Right, like Yoast, Wordfence works that way. Smush is image compressor, that also works that way. We call them freemium plugins because the majority of the tool is free, and there's a premium upgrade because people like us like to keep the lights on and feed our children. So those types of things, the plugin code is all freely available. It just doesn't function unless you have a premium key or a way to unlock those premium features. But all of the code base is still in the repository. If you went and installed Wordfence, it's the same code that I'm running on a premium site as I'm running on my free sites. Any other questions?
What's the alternative to the cPanel? You said the cPanels are really dangerous. Like what?
It's not. cPanels are not dangerous. cPanels are completely safe. It's how people are using them. And it's the fact that lots of hosting providers are saying, hey, we'll put as many sites as you, and it works, right? It works, and it's great. I would just, if you're going to do it that way, and you're going to put a ton of sites into a cPanel, you're going to have to watch all of your eggs in that basket very carefully. Harden each of them, make it so that if one site gets hacked, it limits the damage that happens with the other ones, but they're all running with the same server-based user, so the same permissions. So if one site gets hacked, you're really at risk. And I have one customer that I work with who limits 10 sites to a cPanel, and he's got like a ton of them, so he's got hundreds of sites, but 10 sites in a cPanel because he knows if it gets hacked, he doesn't want, 150 sites hacked. Yeah?
I'm using NordVPN. Do you know how effective that is for any of this?
For VPNs? Well, what VPNs are basically doing is encrypting your traffic when you're on your laptop or your computer and you're connecting through an access point that may not have security. It's not going to help you with any of your vulnerabilities on your WordPress site. A firewall can help you. A firewall buys you more time because it says, okay, this is a SQL injection coming in, block that type of attack. There are other firewalls that will detect malicious activity and block those types of attack. So, but a VPN isn't going to help you for this particular problem. It will help you with many other problems though. And I think that's time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for that wonderful talk. Let's give her a hand. All right, and if you have any questions that you needed to ask Kathy, she will be around until the end. She will be around the rest of the day.
I'm over at the sponsor tables if you want to stop by and say hi.
There you are, Wordfence sponsor tables, all right? Let's give it up one more time for Kathy. And please